All right, now we're recording. Welcome everyone to our second Thursday of early childhood learning in the garden. I'm so happy to be here with Rena. And if you were here last week, you know how rich the program was, and I can't wait for tonight. And the chat is open, so at any time, if you have questions or any interaction, just throw it in the chat, and Rena and I can both see that. And we will send out this recording, and you will get all the resources from the session. And I will also be sharing some links in the chat as we proceed. All right, Rena, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all who came to join us tonight. Um, this is the second workshop in our Kids in the Garden workshop series. And those of you who were here last session know that we kind of overviewed the 3 C's of farm to classroom, and that is community, classroom, and cafeteria. So today we're going to be focusing on the classroom aspect, which means today is all about garden curriculum. And there will be a whole bunch of resources that I'm sending out after this, including book lists and simple resources that you may want to have on hand. So please do, as always, toss in any questions that you have on the chat. When we are participating, please make sure that it says to everyone and not just to hosts and panelists, so we can all see what you have to say, so that we can interact with each other since there isn't a voice option. So with that in mind, your starting prompt to get us going this evening is in the chat. I'd like you to share a memory from your childhood where you discovered or learned something about growing, farming, or gardening, and what you think may have helped this particular lesson stick in your mind. So I'll give you just a minute or two to jot down an idea in the chat. All right, Dinah's the first to share with us. She remembers learning how to plant a tree, a birch sapling. That is really cool. I can't say that I've ever planted a birch sapling. And what made it memorable was doing the activity with your dad. It was a peaceful time, and the relationships are really what helped that lesson to stick in mind. I love that. Thank you for sharing, Dinah. Lindsay shares planting cherry tomato plants with your mom and then eating them from the garden when they were still warm from the sun, and that you still choose to grow them every year. So for you, it was really that sensory experience that stayed with you. Anna Gabriella shares having a 3-bin compost system, very nice, and using shovels to move materials, sitting on the hay bales in a round with vining plants growing over the top to make a special outdoor classroom. Yeah, so very hands-on sensory experiences I'm hearing here. Jacob adds, as a 6 or 7-year-old, you accidentally killed your plants by giving them hot water in the winter. I understand that confusion. And then learning that lesson that plants have feelings, but that they don't want the same things as people. And that's a really interesting lesson because there are similarities in what plants and animals need, and there are differences as well. So that seems like a very powerful lesson, Jacob. Megan shares putting cages around the tomato plants to make sure they grew properly. Awesome. So I love hearing that so many of these lessons that stuck with you really had to do with the relationships that sort of helped you make this learning experience. And so I think that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind as we talk about this curriculum piece, because sometimes it's not even about the lessons that you're teaching, but the authenticity and the relationship that you're building with the children as you do this, as well as some of that sense of purpose here, right? That we were putting on the cages to make sure they grew properly, that we learned the hard lesson of plants not always needing the same things that we do. These are important things that stick with us over time. And Brianna shares seeding peas in the garden and dropping the seeds down a bamboo pole so you didn't have to bend over. Very cool. And remembering, what are we going to do with this bamboo pole? Very cool. Yeah, I love this. Well, thank you all for sharing. And anyone else who's still working on it, feel free to toss it in. But I always like to ground us in some of our memories because I think they can really inform how we learn and how we can help our students to learn. All right.
Rena, you might have frozen. It might just be me. While we wait for Rena, I will tell you a couple of things to look forward to. The first is the Massachusetts Farm and Sea to School Conference. And if you all are interested, save the date. It is going to be March 18th, and it is at Smith College this year. And we just launched registration. Rena, I'm making a couple of announcements while you were frozen. You're still kind of frozen. And this is our conference website if you want to look at registration. And the second thing I want to tell you all is that we just launched a Harvest of the Month program for early educators. And I'm going to put the link in the chat for that. If you sign up, you will receive each month a newsletter that is based on the Harvest of the Month program. And the newsletter has activities, little crop history, and a great joke and announcements from Mass Farm to School. Let me get this link for you to sign up for that. And it is a monthly newsletter. Oh, it looks like Rena has called in some tech help. All right.
Yes,
So
it pays
this
to be what now?
great. Thank you for Rena's tech help.
You're going to want to rejoin, but if not,
All right. I am just going to sign out and then back in again because that's how it's going to hook up to the live connection. And I promise this will be the last interruption.
Okay.
My sincere apologies.
No worries. So while Rena is signing out and coming back in, the link I just put in the chat is for our Harvest of the Month early childhood newsletter. It is a new hot off the presses newsletter. We also have an elementary and secondary Harvest of the Month for educators, but we just launched this, and it goes with our year-long crops. So please consider signing up, especially while we wait for Rena to come back.
Thank you. Here we go. Alrighty, so as not to waste your time, we're just going to breeze through the Mass Audubon work. We're awesome. We love getting kids out in nature. We want to support you doing that. We have 6 amazing nature-based preschools across the state. We have more than 110 sanctuaries. Come check us out. We're lots of fun. And with that in mind, okay. So early childhood at Mass Audubon is definitely one of our priorities because we know that early educators have such an incredible capacity for deep impact in children's lives because you get them so early in life. And so we really want to support you all so that children have access to the many benefits of nature and start to build a strong connection with it so that hopefully they have lifelong habits that have them engaging in nature and wanting to protect it. So with that in mind, this was just a little, debrief from last time connecting here. But we did already talk a little bit about the 3 C's and how we kind of overviewed all of that. But why don't we just give you all a moment in the chat? If you were here last week, anything that really stuck with you from last week's session, or if you've started having any plans of how you might use that information. So why don't you toss that up in the chat for just a minute or two? And then we will jump into the curriculum.
All right, Rena, no taker. So we'll just go on with tonight's program.
Fair enough. Alrighty. So when it comes to garden curriculum, I very much believe that it is more than just the science aspect. All nature-based learning can be seen as science, but really your garden curriculum can connect to any of the different social and emotional and developmental areas that you're focusing on. So today we're going to talk a little bit about all of these areas and different garden activities that you can do that support children's development in them. So let's start with social and emotional growth in the garden. So first of all, this is a practice some of you may already be familiar with, but the idea of sit spots. And sit spots is the concept that you and your class can just find places among your outdoor spaces where you can just sit and be quiet for a moment. And this may look very different depending on the age of your students. It may be that you take the whole class and you just sit together quietly for 10 seconds or 30 seconds and just kind of observe the world around you. If your students are a little bit older or it's later in the year, you may encourage each of them to pick their own special spot to sit. And this is an opportunity for kids to get some mindfulness practice in, some calming behaviors. It's also a wonderful chance for them to start practicing observation and developing a relationship with this unique spot, and as they notice changes over time. And you may even learn, if you do this enough with students, that they may start to practice self-regulation by going to these sit spots when they're feeling upset or overwhelmed or sad. So it's just a nice way to think of the garden as a revival sort of space where you can go and just kind of be rejuvenated by the beautiful surroundings. And your garden may not look like this. It may literally be a few flower pots, and that's fine too. Just remember that being outside already has a calming effect. Now, there's a huge teamworking aspect of being in the garden with your students, anywhere from planting the garden, planning the garden, caring for, harvesting, eating, turning over the weeds. All of this is something you're doing together as a group. And so it really builds that classroom cohesiveness, that pride in the work that they are doing and what they manage to accomplish. I love, whenever possible, if individual classes or grades can have their own designated garden space. And again, that might be a single pot, a single flower pot, or a single space or plant that they're growing. But when a class has their own area that they're caring for, there's really that sense of ownership and buy-in and excitement for the changes that happen in their plant over time. Part of this includes teaching responsibility. You have weekly jobs that you need to do. You have to water the plants and weed them and check to see how they're doing. So it's teaching responsibility. And then simply having some garden rituals, visiting the garden and talking with the kids, what's changed since the last time we were here, or singing songs, or even giving your plants a little morning greeting. It sounds very silly, but when I was growing up, every time my mother saw a tiny little plant that was trying to grow, she would always have us talk to it and say, "Come on, little plant, you can do it." And it seems very silly, but it always stuck with me. And the thought that we can encourage something else that's trying to grow and do its best, once again, can build some of that empathy and connection with your garden spaces. So, music, movement, and dramatic play. This is a really fun one, and there's lots of different ways you can take it. So, one of the first one kind of connects to the idea of the sit spots, and that is that together with the children or individually with clipboards, you sit quietly and you take note of all the different sounds that you hear around you, and you mark them off on a picture, making a little bit of a map. So if you're doing this as a class, you might mark yourself as a circle in the middle is where you're sitting. And then every time the children hear a sound, they can point in the direction or they can tell you what they hear, and you mark it off on the map. And maybe it's birds, maybe it's leaves rustling in the wind, maybe it's the sounds of cars or people talking. But it's neat to just kind of really focus on one of our senses in the garden. Again, it kind of slows our bodies down, helps us to get to know the space better. And you never know what you might hear while you're doing that. The more you stay and listen, the more you're going to start to notice. Garden yoga, very open ended. I am not a yoga teacher. I am by no means an expert in this, but you can kind of play with the idea of different movements and ways that the garden takes shape. And so, maybe you're talking about how bean plants like to twist and turn and curl as they grow upwards. Maybe you're thinking about the broad leaves of the pumpkin spreading out, or you're thinking about the butterfly that lazily flaps its wings as it lands on the flowers. And so you can have kids think about different ways that things are moving or positioned in the garden and try some of that out with children. Now, if you're working with slightly older audiences, maybe kindergarten and up, you can try a very silly practice called veggie offs. I did take this from one of the camps I worked at. But the idea is that two children are going to face off against each other, and they're going to have to act like whatever garden plant you say. If you want to take it up a notch, you can add an emotion with it. So, on the count of three, 1, 2, 3, silly carrot. And the two kids have to act like what they think a silly carrot would act like, or sad banana, or angry turnip. And so the children are doing something that's obviously very funny and silly, but they can have a round of applause and a clap-o-meter to see who they think did a better job of representing a silly carrot. But it's a playful little way to kind of get you out and thinking about what's growing in the garden. Build a plant. So this is the idea where you add on pieces to a plant, because plants are made up of many different parts. And so you get to talk about each individual part and how they function together. We're about to watch a really phenomenal video on that. And it's all about how you build a bean plant. So there's the seed, and then there are the roots, and then there are the first leaves and the stem and the flower and the fruit, and then there's more seeds again. And so you can build that together with the children, either acting out the different parts or with felt board pieces to show the different parts, or drawing it, or costumes. So there's a lot of different directions you could take that in. Soundscapes. So soundscapes are a way to add some music to your garden. And these are dual purpose, because not only can they introduce some interesting sounds to your garden, it also has the benefit that it can help and keep away some of the garden pests, because of the unexpected noises that are contributed every time the wind moves or an animal moves by it. And so this could be something as simple as putting some wind chimes out, or hanging a few keys on a clothes hanger, or some tin cans, or some rattling chains. But just the idea that hanging some things that will make noise as they move both gives you an added sensory element, but then also helps to deter some of the pests. And I do recommend, if you do that, let the kids make them, right? Give them a bunch of different materials to play with. Metal, pieces of metal make some really interesting noise when they bang against each other. But you can get pretty creative with it, and just see what they come up with. And then, of course, you can always do songs and finger plays, inch by inch, row by row, all of these different songs that are out there. And I, as always, recommend when you can doing them out in the garden because it just has that much more significance to it. All right, so we're going to try this and see if the sound works. If the sound doesn't work, what I will do is grab the YouTube link and hand it to Dinah, and she'll play it on her computer. But we're going to cross our fingers that sound comes through on this one. Here we go. No sound?
I do not hear any sound, Rena.
Okay, let's see. I can copy video URL. I'm
You
going
want to put
to,
it in the chat?
that's what I'm
I can
doing.
scoop it out of the chat.
All right, give that a try and see if it works on your end.
All right, hopefully. All right, hold on 1 second.
And I will stop sharing so you can do that.
Doo-doo-doo. I'm going to turn off my camera so that my Wi-Fi is good, but you have to give me a thumbs up before I turn off my camera that you can hear it.
Sadly not, Dinah. Well, no luck for me today, huh?
Hmm. Uh, okay. That's very strange.
Well, let me try one last thing.
Give me a second.
Try this. It usually has a little tab that says include sound, but it's not giving
Hold
me
on
that.
one moment.
Yeah, you try.
Mhm. Yeah, hold on 1 second. Let me try one more time. Third time's a charm.
I'm crossing my fingers.
Everyone's being very patient tonight. Maybe we don't see that they're not, but I appreciate it. I can feel it. I can feel the patience. All right, give me 1 sec.
So I like to jokingly say we're early educators, not technology masters.
Come on. Why is it not letting me click this button for share options?
The good news is if it chooses not to play, then you get to watch me make an idiot of myself as I actually sing the song that Jed sings with his family. So at least you'll get to laugh really hard if you don't get to watch the video.
Uh, it's interesting. It's not letting me share. It's not letting me click the share sound button. I think you should sing the song.
Okay, well, and Ziva gets to sit
And
here and
we
listen
will,
to us
and
singing the song.
people have the link, and so they
Yes.
can watch this on their own.
Yes. So
And
I
this
will
is
send out the link right now.
dress up a green bean. All right.
Yes, so it's dress up a green bean. So the basic premise of the video is Jed has two very patient young boys, and he dresses up his son as a green bean. He starts by handing him the bean, and then he puts some Velcroed strings along his ankle to be the roots, and then he gets some. I think the very first leaves, he gets the cotyledons, so he puts the leaves on his son, and then he gets some pipe cleaners and attaches the pipe cleaners to his wrist and then up to the door, because as we know, peas like to climb. And then he puts a flower around his son's head, and then his younger son comes out with a little bee puppet, and the bee puppet comes to pollinate the flower. And this is where you get to learn the adorable bee song. So here's how the song goes. I'm a honeybee, pollen basket on my knee, and a stinger on my back, so you're afraid of me. But I'd rather gather nectar. I'm an excellent collector. I'm a honeybee, buzz, buzz. So it's a very cute little pollination song. Yeah, I know, it's awesome, right? Hopefully this makes up for all the technological issues we've had. And then what he does is he takes the flower off of his son's neck and replaces it with a piece of paper that has long green beans hanging down from it. So he hangs those around his son's neck, and now he's a green bean plant with all the beautiful ripe green beans ready for eating. You'll see when you watch the video, the materials he made are super simple. We're talking like tape, felt, yarn, and pipe cleaners. So very easily something you could replicate if you wanted to, but you could also just as easily do this as a drawing on a whiteboard or with felt board pieces, or any other way you'd like to do it. So it's just a fun, dramatic play sort of way to engage kids in the process of growing from seed to plant to seed again. All right, so let's get my PowerPoint back up here. Sans delightful video. That's okay. All right, so art in the garden. And here's where you'll actually get to do some fun activity in your own private spaces here. So art in the garden, the first activity is one we did last week. For those of you who weren't here, that was planning a dream garden. And so in that activity, I encouraged participants to sketch out their existing garden space or existing school space that could potentially become a garden, and to decorate it as you might your dream garden. What would it look like if you could plant and grow whatever you wanted? And this is a project that I like to give mixed medium for. So I have a bunch of old seed catalogs from Burpees and Johnny's. They send out millions of them for free, so just sign up. I usually have some fruits and veggie stickers. I have crayons and colored pencils and markers. For the younger children, since we do have an existing garden, I usually give them like a pre-made template of 6 rectangles, which are the shape of our garden. But if you don't have something set up, that's okay. You can let them be totally open-ended. But the idea is that the kids are going to show you what they think the garden should look like. And this is a great way to get ideas from the kids to learn about what they're excited to grow, what they're thinking about, and hopefully will help inform your decisions of what you're going to try to grow in your class. Even if you know it may or may not be successful. My daughters have tried to have me plant cantaloupe and watermelon for the last 6 years. I think this year I actually managed to get a watermelon about this big and had about 3 bites of edible fruit in it. That's the closest I've ever come to growing a successful watermelon. But we keep trying because they really want to. And one of these days it's going to work. So it's okay if you try something that you're not so sure is going to work, just so long as you have other things you know will work. So that's planting a dream garden. You can do some very simple color and shape recognition with the kids. I am notorious for collecting those paint swatches from hardware stores all the time, especially ones that have a gradient on them. And then in the garden, handing the cards to kids and asking them to try to find at least one of the shades of color on their color card. And so they're walking around the garden, they're looking for different colors. Sometimes they don't find the colors in the garden, but they find their colors on their friend's shoe. We can talk about what types of colors are easier to find in the garden and which ones are harder. We can do it multiple times a year and explore why is it easier to find some colors in the summer than it is to find them in the wintertime. You can also do this with different shapes. You can laminate different shapes of paper and have them try to find different shapes in the garden. Can you find heart shapes and rectangles and triangles and ovals and teardrop shapes and all of those? So, it's just a very fun kind of search and find sort of game for those that are working on shape and color recognition. Observational drawings, we're going to dive a little deeper into that, but it is as it sounds. It's drawing what you see. And maybe your drawing turns out looking nothing like what you're observing, and that's okay. But the idea is to really get to know what you're drawing through observation and time and patience, and just really spending a little bit of time really getting to observe and look closely at those objects. Flower pressing. You can do this the old-fashioned way. I grew up doing this in big, heavy books, but I've seen some pretty unique ways to do this with young children, such as, putting a fresh flower between 2 pieces of paper or muslin fabric, and then taking a rolling pin or a toy truck or a children's hammer or wooden blocks and basically banging on top of the flower and seeing what works. So it can become a very cool gross motor activity. And it's less of a pressing and more of a printing process. So when you do this, often the color will transfer to the paper or to the fabric. It actually makes beautiful Mother's Day cards, I discovered. So it's a fun thing to try out with the kids and a good way to kind of get some of that gross motor energy out. Nature circles. This is an activity that is very calming, very meditative. It's basically the idea of taking small, natural, loose parts and not really giving much in the way of direction and letting children do with them what they will. You can call them nature circles, but then you're telling children what to do with the parts. I prefer just to call it loose parts play, and letting the children explore the materials. And again, it's very diverse based on the season, right? If you do this in the spring, you may have a lot of petals from blossoms falling off the tree. If you do it in the fall, you're going to have all kinds of really beautiful colored leaves. In the winter, you may have different chunks of ice that the kids have broken up from the ground, or pine cones and acorns. So this is a fun one where you can collect materials with the children, give them a tray or a designated space, and let them explore. I also think if you're going to be doing artwork in the garden, bring out some of the nice materials, right? I know they love crayons and markers, but let them play with watercolors. Let them try oil pastels or colored pencils or things that allow different blendings of color or fine detail. Because, it really is inspirational to be surrounded by all the diverse textures and colors and shapes. So I like to give kids materials that show that this is a special sort of drawing. And then linking this to the previous activity, the sound and music, you can create anti-pest decorations that are visual in addition to auditory. So many pests do not like shiny, sparkling, or moving type stimuli. So things like old CDs or mylar ribbons or anything shiny or sparkly, hanging those in the garden will not only add a very nice visual appeal, but will help to scare off predators. And I will say, I have tested this myself. I was teaching a workshop in my upstairs office, and I look out the window, and there is an entire flock of turkeys in my garden, and I can do nothing to stop them because I'm teaching. So I simply stuck some stakes in the ground, tied regular yarn around it, and then got some. The only mylar ribbons I could find were New Year's Eve party ones. They're just like these silver tinsel things, hung them around the garden. Never saw the turkeys in the rest of that season. So they really did not like those sparkly ribbons that I hung. So that's another way that you can kind of do some purposeful art with the children. So getting back into that concept of observational drawings, gardens have so many prompts, so many things that can inspire us. And it's not just art when children are doing observational drawings, they are slowing down. So you're getting, again, some of that mindfulness, some of that calming aspect to it. Children are using this as an opportunity to record what they observe, which means they actually have to use their observational skills. So they are translating what they can observe with their five senses into a visual picture, which is a whole nother set of skills. They are paying attention to fine detail. They may notice things about an object that they've never seen before because they haven't taken the time to really look. They get to understand the object better as they spend more time studying it and thinking about, oh, well, this little bunch of leaves at the bottom of the flower head is actually where it was before it opened up, and it had been closed before and now it's open. And of course, as we start to observe and understand, we start to have more questions. So we're building in a lot of that science language as we are describing what we see with our words and asking questions. So simply from doing what might be considered an art project, there is science and language and cognitive abilities and fine motor detail, all of which is happening through this singular process. So what we are going to do, I'm not going to ask you to go outside because it's pretty dark, but I did in my email request that you find something that grows, that did grow, that came from a garden, or a photograph of something that you could use as a prompt. I'm not going to say it has to be a drawing. If you are someone who really does not enjoy drawing, you could make this a literary activity where you write down what you observe or see, create a story or a poem. But I want you to spend a good 10 minutes with your fruit, your vegetable, your house plant, your photo of a field. Really observe it, get to know it, think about it, and see how it inspires you, whether that's listing your questions, writing poetry, drawing or coloring. So I'm going to give you until 6:50. And when we come back, I would love for you to share in the chat um, what your prompt was, what you selected for yourself, and where your observations took you. You know, you can tell us if it was a drawing or if you wrote something or just kind of how the experience went for you. So we will be back at 6:50 to discuss. And it's amazing when you do it with adults, how differently people interpret the same object, and it's so cool, and it's like having a museum gallery because it is so unique. Everyone has such a different perspective. One person, the last time I did it, even drew it on her phone, which was really cool. So you can come up with a lot that way. And so, you know, taking some of the pressure off that it doesn't have to be a realistic drawing, but it can just be, you know, your own way of representing it is definitely helpful. So let's see. Jacob shares, you tried to draw an Italian oak sapling in your living room. You have an oak sapling inside your living room? That is super cool. A little jealous there. Dinah tried to doodle a sweet potato. I think that's very cute. For some reason, when you use the word doodle, it makes me imagine you gave it like little googly eyes and a smiley face, which I think would actually be really fun. Cartoon sweet potato. Um, but as I said, you know, this is just a very open-ended opportunity to, you know, spend some time with something from the garden. Brianna shares drawing a picture from your camera roll of a nasturtium flower. So for the first year ever, I grew nasturtiums, and I grew them because I'd heard they were edible and that they pair well growing with certain plants, and discovered that apparently the taste of them is actually kind of like horseradish, which I happen to enjoy, but my children decided it would be really funny if every time we went in the garden, they would get a bigger and bigger handful of flowers and make me eat them all at once to see just how strongly the horseradish flavor would come through. So this is why you might not want to ever have your own children if you have a garden. So nasturtium flowers, they're lots of fun, but careful when eating them. All righty, so let's move on to our next activity. We did our little show and share. And again, as I say, if you do this in your class, I recommend you put them up on the wall and make a big gallery of it and have the prompt there. So this was our inspiration, and this is where we went with it, because I think it's really cool for kids to see how differently everyone decided to make their art. Hopefully they all did it in their own unique perspective. All right, so language and literacy in the garden. So there is so many cool things you can do around language and literacy in the garden. Again, similar to that idea of the color search and the shape search, you can do an ABC garden. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're planting everything from asparagus to zinnias. But it does mean you can go into the garden and see if you can find things that represent each letter of the alphabet. So it might be that you see aphids and butterflies and caterpillars and dandelions. So you're just trying to look in the garden, how many different letters are here in the garden today? You can be teaching language as you teach words that are unfamiliar. So teaching the different parts of a plant or the different parts of a flower or the textures you might use to describe different plants or the flavors that you would use. So building language around vocabulary and garden themed language is another fun way to kind of tie that in. And, you know, building on that is the game of I Notice, I Wonder, which comes out of the Beatles training program. Any of you have ever done it? Some people prefer OWL, the what is it? Observe, wonder, and learn. So, what did you observe? What are you wondering? And what have you learned? But it's generally the idea that you have something from the garden, some kind of prompt. And first, with the children, you pass it around and you make as many different observations as you can. What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What colors do you see? What textures? You know, do you recognize it? It reminds me of this or this. And then after you've recorded all their observations, then we start asking questions. And I really encourage you to get well beyond the question of what is it, right? Because what is it is a labeling question. And as soon as they have the answer, that's it. We don't care anymore. We've moved on. I'd rather know, what would it look like inside? What did it come from? What part of the plant is it? Is it edible? Who likes to eat it? What would happen if I plant it? What would happen if I dropped it in the water? What would happen if I bury it? So starting to ask a lot of questions. And you can then take some of these questions and explore them and see what would happen. But in the first two stages, that observation and questioning is really building language skills with the children. On a complete opposite side, going from very concrete in what you observe, is the idea of using the garden to inspire creative writing. So, going out into the garden and the children notice something like holes in a leaf, or something's been digging in the dirt, or that flower that was blooming yesterday now has the beginnings of a fruit growing on the end of it. So, taking those little aha moments, those little sparks of curiosity, and saying, tell me a story about what happened here. What do you think is going to happen next? And so letting the children say, oh, well, these holes were created by a family of angry ants that were really mad because the plant put its roots into their home. And so they came up and they started biting it all over. And that's where all the holes came from. And, so see where they can go with it and have some fun with some creative writing as the children narrate a story to you that you can write down for them. Or if they're a bit older, maybe they write it themselves. Food memories. This was another activity that we did last time. That was the one where we drew our faces, and then in our heads, we put some of the words that we think about when we remember one of our favorite, most memorable food dishes. And then in your mouth, you draw the picture of that special food. And so, doing that is both a fine motor activity, but it's also building language as you think about sharing those special moments around foods that you eat during the holidays, or you make with your grandparents, or you always get it on your birthday. And then, of course, there is a humongous selection of children's books around gardening, growing, cooking, planting, eating, and everything else under the sun. So, I always like to point out that when it comes to children's books about gardening, it's more than just vegetables. It's more than just flowers. There are so many more topics that fall into this farm to school category. So, yes, gardening is definitely a part of that. Especially, I would include urban gardening because that's becoming more and more of a thing. Farming, livestock, right? Remember, farm animals live on a farm. Thinking about wool and shearing and other fibers that we grow to wear, eggs and milk and bees and honey and maple syrup. All of those are things that are grown on various types of farms. So remembering that you don't have to just pick books about growing vegetables or growing flowers. Then it also includes things like cooking. I especially love books that focus around cultural recipes and flavors and have multi-generational families that are cooking, or ones that are talking about canning and preserving, or even some of the old ways that maybe aren't used quite as frequently. So thinking about it's not just about eating fresh food now, what can we do so that we can continue eating from our garden all year long? I also think it's really important because it may represent members of our community, the thought that farming and growing food and fishing and harvesting can all be ways of reducing food insecurity, right? If we're going to be talking about food, then we need to be aware of the fact that some of our students and some of our families may not have access to enough food to feel very secure and always having something to eat. And so, how can we have books that show that so the children and families feel seen in a way that is not embarrassing or singling out? And it's also important for other children to know that not everyone has the same access to food that they might have. And so bringing that up and finding some books that talk about ways to support food security. And then I would also say this is a topic that comes up a lot. What about children who are, I don't love the term picky eaters. I prefer restrictive eaters, or, children that have very specific preferences around eating. So books that encourage trying new foods and understanding that there may be certain flavors you feel comfortable with, and there may be ones that you're not so comfortable with. I also think it's really important to have books that show children's reaction to other children's food choices or dietary practices so that we can have conversations with the children about that. I know the whole concept, don't yuck people's yum, is becoming a pretty popular one. We need to do more than that. We need to highlight different types of foods. We need to be making sure that children see their meals reflected in the books that are being shared. And we need to show that sometimes children might feel different or othered because they're not eating the same thing as other children. And how do we show curiosity and respect rather than disgust or rejection? And so there are actually some great books out there around supporting how we talk to children about different families' practices around food. So, what I'm going to do, we'll do this in the chat, is I had asked you all to think about a children's book that you like that has anything to do with farming, gardening, growing, eating, cooking, any of those. And I'd like us to share a few ideas. So, please toss a book or several books that you have enjoyed, either as a child or now in your classroom. You don't need to put the author's name if you don't know it, but if you do, so much the better. And as you are doing that, I will say not to worry. I have a lovely compendium of children's books around all of those topics I just mentioned and more. That's going to be one of the resources I send out at the end of this. So if you feel like you don't have a lot of ideas around books to use, not to worry. You're going to get a huge list with some of my favorites sorted by topic. So we will have some of those coming around. Oh, and thank you, Anna Gabriella, for sharing some book resources there. Nicole, I love the Ugly Vegetables book. That's a great example of learning respect for other people's cultures and practices around gardening. Growing Vegetable Soup is a really fun, colorful book to do. Oh, Brianna brought the same one. Good for you. Yep, that one's been around the block. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. Oh, excellent, Jacob. So the Stone Soup book, what I love about that one is there are hundreds of different versions out there from every possible imaginable culture. I have seen Chinese versions. I have seen Jewish versions. I have seen European versions. I've seen African versions all over. So it'd be really neat to kind of look into some of the different versions and see how the ingredients change. The story remains the same, but the flavors change. And then, yeah, it's a great prompt for then making soup with the children, that whole community feel of making something together. So that is also a really fun one to include. So feel free to keep putting some ideas in there if you have others. I'm also curious if there are any farm related topics I didn't mention for having children's books around that you think we should also consider. I should probably have something in there about growing mushrooms, which I have some about harvesting and foraging mushrooms. I don't know if I have any about growing mushrooms for food. All right. Well, as you keep thinking and maybe tossing some ideas in there, we will move on to our next section. Oh, and look, here I even have a few book ideas for you. Awesome. So all of these are on the list, so don't worry about having to photograph it or anything like that. But these are some of my favorites. So The Bee Man is about a young boy whose grandfather is a beekeeper. That one is a really nice balance of it's a really good rhythm for reading to young children because it's all in rhyme, but it actually has a lot of information, and there's more info in the back about beekeeping and beehives and the community aspect of bees. So that's a really awesome one. Feeding the Sheep is that whole cycle from sheep to sweater. Tops and Bottoms, kids love that one, and it's fun for talking about what parts of the plant are we eating. And then Errol's Garden is one around urban gardening. The next couple of books are all around children's reaction to other people's food. I really like A Normal Pig. It's, for lack of a better term, it's a biracial pig. She has two different types of pigs for parents, and other kids are making fun of the foods that she's bringing, and she's feeling very different and othered. And then her family takes her to visit the city, and she sees how many different communities are there, and she sees how many different foods are being served in the food court. And it really empowers her to say, maybe it's weird for you, but I like it. So I think that's a really great example of teaching sort of that respect. Food insecurity, I'm missing a few newer ones that I have around soup kitchens. But these two stories are both about harvesting and fishing. to supplement food. And there are a couple new ones. I think Saturdays at the food pantry, I think is one, and that's a really good one. And then some about food preserving. I actually really like Tomatoes for Neela. It's an Indian family that cans tomato sauce that they use in their recipes all year long. Some community cooking ones. There are tons of these. I do love Mama Panya's pancakes because it's a very different pancake recipe. It involves chili peppers, and it's a recipe being made, I believe, in Kenya, and they have the recipe on the back. And then some different books around selective eaters. I do love Gregory the Picky Eater because he eats human type foods, and the goats are trying to get him to eat garbage, which goats don't actually eat, but people think they do. But it's silly to think of, all the foods he's eating that his parents say aren't healthy for goat are actually very healthy for people. So this is just a couple ideas you can look into. But as I said, my list will have a lot more when that gets sent out. Nicole, I am kind of torn on the Yoko book as well. I have it, and my children, my personal children, actually really love that story. Um, I'm not 100% sold on it. And I don't love that most of the kids are still not on board with trying new things. So I always say anytime you're thinking about checking out a book from a list, to always read it yourself first before deciding to share it with the class, because you know your community best. And I think it's important to know what you're going to be reading before you share it. So thank you, Nicole, for adding in your 2 cents on that one. All right, so math in the garden. Lots of places where math fits into garden work. And honestly, one of the great things coming up is that in February, we have the Olympics. And why not try your own version of Seed Olympics? And what I would do there is try starting some seeds inside in the month of February or early March, and have a bit of a contest and have people vote on which of the different types of seeds do they think is going to sprout the first, which one's going to get its true leaves first, which one's going to get to be the tallest, which one's the widest, which is going to be the first one to get planted outside. So you can kind of award some Olympic medals for first, second, and third to sprout, or first, second, and third to get their first true leaves, or first one to make it to 6 inches. It might be a fun little contest that you could do. And I do also say that Seed Olympics translates well to Garden Olympics, where you actually take it outside, and then you have more opportunities for which one has the most flowers, which one has the strongest smell, which one has the most produce on it, which one is the most colorful. So, and then I use it as a laminated chart, and I do it 3 times a summer. So I'll take it out in June, July, and August, because the answers will change. So it's pretty cool to think of, oh, well, peas may have been the Olympic winner for height in June, but come in July, the beans are much taller. And then who knows, by August, maybe the corn is taller than everything. So, we can get some good predictions and math in terms of size, shape, and direction. Square foot gardening. So I am a big fan of square foot gardening. I don't think I mentioned it for you all I think actually I did mention it last week for those of you who were here, but the basic idea that if you're using a garden bed, that you can break it up into square foot increments. And then based on what you're planning to put in each of those square foot spaces, this format will tell you how many seeds you can put in there. So for example, a single square foot can only sustain 1 tomato plant, but you could plant 16 carrots in that space. You could put 4 ears of 4 corn stalks, supposedly, in 1 square foot, but you need at least 2 or 4, I can't remember, square feet for a pumpkin plant. So you can map out the garden with the children. All right, we've got, 10 squares in this garden bed, and we want to plant these plants, so we can do this many in this square foot and that many in that square foot and this over here and that over there. And then you have the idea of the counting and the measuring and the how many, but then you also can draw a map on grid paper or regular paper and get that type of math in there too. So that's something really neat. And I'm actually 2 weeks going to be trying this out with Zanetti, the public school in Springfield, one of them. And they are partnering their kindergarten class. They have garden buddies or learning buddies, I think with the 3rd or 4th grade. And so the kindergartners are going to do the planning your dream garden. And then the fourth graders are going to partner with them to take their dream garden and do the math to see how could we actually measure this out and put it into our actual garden space using square foot gardening. So that's a really outside the box program that they're going to try out. We'll see how it goes over at Zanetti, and we're super excited to see what happens when you kind of mix together some different skill levels and ages to create a functional garden plan. So other ways that seeds and planting can fit into math is when you're doing the actual planting in the ground. How far apart do the rows need to be from each other? How far apart do the seeds need to be when you're putting them in the rows? Do they want to be in a round? Do they want to be long? Corn needs to have multiple rows next to each other for cross-pollination. Thinning, how far apart should the seedlings be once they start to grow? Directionality, if you're putting the garlic or the onion bulbs in the ground, the point has to go up and the roots have to go down. So lots of those different pieces and math language and concepts that you need to have there. And then you can certainly do sequencing, right? First seed, then sprout, then flower or plant, then fruit, and then back to seed again. So you're learning about sequencing. And you can sequence many things in the garden. You can sequence the life cycle of a butterfly or a ladybug or the toad that comes to live in the garden and eat all of your slugs. So you can get a lot of that sequential learning in. There's opportunities for sorting, sorting alike and not alike, different types of cherry tomatoes, different shapes, different colors, different parts of the plant that we're eating. So one bin might be leaves that we eat, and it could be kale and spinach and lettuce, and one might be seeds that we eat, and it's popcorn and peas and peanuts. And then you may have another one for the fruit, and that's cherry tomatoes and cucumbers and strawberries. So there's ways that you can do some sorting. And then, of course, cooking is always involving math because of all the measuring that you do and the mixing of ingredients together and the temperature and the changing of matter. So lots of different types of math in there. Checking in on the chat here, Jacob was asking, the book is Gregory the Terrible Eater, or Gregory the Picky Eater. I think it's a not Leo Leone. What is it? It'll be on the list, so don't worry about it. Anna has another book link to share from the Chicopee Fresh Library. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Love that you guys are all thinking about this. Okay, so here is an example of my garden Olympics that I use with my garden club, but you can mix it up based on what you want to do with it. And depending on the age of the children, my students tend to draw examples of what they see being the tallest plant. I would probably write the words in there. If you have slightly older kids, they could actually measure. So the tallest plant was 3 feet long, and it was this. The widest leaves were 4 inches wide, and it was this plant. The most leaves was on this plant. It had this many leaves. So you can decide how complicated or simple you want to make this. You could even take photos of the plants and put images of the photos in there. So you could go back and compare the June Olympics to the July Olympics. So just think about the different ways that you could explore less, more, width, length, height, productivity, all of that. All right, science in the garden. Here we go. So I love science. Big surprise there, I'm sure. So we talked about the I notice, I wonder activity in the language and literacy piece. Where I feel like it comes in here is now that they have, made those observations, asked those questions, now it's the time to actually say, well, can we find some answers to those questions? So for example, we did this activity with my students. One of my students had brought in a very bizarre looking plant. It was about the size of my head. It was somewhat pointed at the bottom with a long, thin root, but then it was lobed around the top. It was kind of a pinkish color, looked like maybe a really big lumpy turnip, maybe. We wanted to know what was inside it. That was a very simple question to answer. We cut it open, and boy, were we surprised, because inside that vegetable were concentric pink and white circles. It was a candy stripe beet, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, or candy striped radish, but I think it was a beet. Um, None of us expected it to be striped on the inside, but that was something that we could use not only as like another observation, but it also then helped us to identify later on, well, what did this actually come from? What is this? And then there was the question, can we eat it? So we looked up how would we prepare it and what do we expect it to taste like? And we could try it. And what part of the plant were we eating? Well, we noticed the root on the bottom, and we went to look for ones in the garden and noticed they were under the dirt. So using that I notice, I wonder experience to then help children design their own ways to get some answers. And I will say it's not about looking up the answer on the computer or asking an expert. It's about what can we try to see if we can learn more about this mystery object. So think about how you can take that curiosity they have for these objects and make it into a lesson where we discover more. Plant partners. I'm still learning about plant partners, and I feel like every time I've got it figured out, I realize I'm wrong. But the general idea is some plants grow better when you plant them together. And so the idea that there are helper plants or partner plants that give to each other in a way that then helps them to grow better. So I had mentioned the nasturtiums tend to do really well with zucchini. I can't honestly say that I observed that myself. They didn't seem to help, but there I have to remember whether the nasturtium helped to keep away the pests or maybe some of the mildew. But I do know that basil and tomato do really, really well together. Cucumbers and tomato do not because they have different watering needs. And the one that I feel like people often know is the three sisters, right? Because when you plant beans, corn, and squash together, the beans help to put nitrogen into the soil. The corn provides something tall and strong for the beans to climb up as they grow. And the squash or pumpkin have big leaves that shade the soil around the plant so that the water doesn't evaporate too quickly. And so planting those together often help the three of them to grow better. Planting things like members of the allium family, like onions or garlic or chives, can help keep pests away from other plants because of their strong scent and strong flavor. So doing oh, there we go. Garlic and strawberries. Really? I should try that one. I assume it's for that reason that the garlic helps keep away pests that would eat the strawberries. I will have to try that next time. I thought about it this year, but I put them in a different bed. So there's some really fun science in there about how plants benefit each other. And you can also then go on to the concept of bugs. What bugs help out in the garden? Which ones do you want to see in the garden? And which ones do you not want to see? If you have ladybugs or praying mantises, that's awesome. If you have aphids or cabbage caterpillars, that's good. And that then leads to bug hunts. We can learn about who is in the garden right now and where are they and what are they doing. So searching out the different bug and bug cousins who visit the garden, trying to learn more about what plants are they living on, what are they eating, can we figure out if they are a garden helper or a garden hurter, if you would like to say that, or garden pests or garden friends. I am one of those very bizarre people who actually got very excited one time when I found a tomato hornworm on my tomatoes. Not because I wanted them to eat my tomatoes, but because the tomato hornworms had already been parasitized by white wasps, which lay their eggs on the hornworms. And then when the larvae hatch, they basically eat the hornworm. And so I was excited to see that the hornworm had already been parasitized, which means I hadn't had to do anything because Mother Nature had taken care of the problem for me. So I got very excited to know that we had a very good natural pest management system going on. So you may be able to discover these things too when you go and search through your garden. And yes, I agree, Dinah. It's a great example for human growth and how we relate and support each other too, right? And we take care of the garden, and then the garden in turn takes care of us because it feeds us. All right. So what other elements of science can we do? So we can talk about what are the parts of the plant that we are eating, right? Because when we are eating fruits and vegetables from the garden, we're not always eating the same item, right? Many of the things that we eat are, in fact, the fruit of the plant. They came from a pollinated flower. So all of the things we traditionally think of as fruits, but then also tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, pumpkin, squash, peppers, all of those are also the fruit of the plant, which often blows children's mind. But what I love to do is, well, a vegetable isn't actually a part of a plant. You can't say I'm eating the vegetable of the plant. So if you are eating a vegetable, what are you actually eating? Well, if you're eating lettuce, you're eating the leaves. If you're eating garlic, you're eating a bulb. If you're eating an onion, you're eating a bulb. If you're eating a carrot, it's the root. So, it's funny to say to kids, like, do you know that you eat roots? And they're like, no, I don't. And I'm like, well, have you ever had a carrot or a beet or a radish? You eat leaves. No. Well, those kale chips are leaves, right? So helping children to understand that we are eating different parts of a plant when we are consuming our vegetables. If you are doing Garden Olympics or Seed Olympics, this is also an opportunity to make predictions and then analyze your results and try to figure out why you got the responses that you did. So there's a science element added in there as well. I also love to talk about pollination as part of garden science, and that's something we'll dive into in just a minute. And then certainly including what else is grown or raised on a farm. I like to go back to, what do we eat? What do we wear? What do we build with? And how many of these things come from or started their lives on a farm, right? If we're wearing a cotton t-shirt, that came from a cotton farm. If we are wearing a wool sweater, that came from a sheep farm. If we are wearing hemp or flax, that was probably raised on a farm. So thinking about all the things in our house, in our daily lives that were grown or raised on a farm. All right, so now we are going to jump into one of my absolute favorite activities, and I'm going to teach this in a couple of versions because there is the really little kid version, the older preschool into kindergarten version, and then the first, second grade and up version. So we're going to do a couple different levels of this, and you can kind of adapt it based on the age of your students. And I am so sorry that we are not doing this in person because this is a really funny game to watch people doing, especially adults. So you'll have to imagine what this looks like because it's hilarious. All right, so the B game, version 1. So this is the version I recommend for young children. You can do it inside or outside. Children are going to learn through this game that bees pollinate by moving bits of pollen from one flower to another, and that's what causes a fruit to be able to grow. And then you can also add in the bee dance element for older children. So in this first version, what you're going to have is either real flowers if you want, or fake flowers. I have little laminated paper flowers and little cups with pom-poms in them. And the cups have either one of two colors. So it's either orange pom-poms or white pom-poms. With the youngest children, the way we're going to do it is the teacher is the first scout bee, and the scout bee flies to the flower. And when they find the flower, the first thing they do is their bee dance. And the bee dance is when you shake your behind. And this is, I swear, what bees actually do to communicate to other bees that they have found a well-filled pollen flower. And then the other bees come. So the first bee shakes their behind. And as they do that, they pick up a piece of pollen. That's one of the pom-poms. So they pick up the pollen. When the other bees see that first teacher doing their waggle dance, they all fly over and get a piece of pollen too. Then the teacher flies over to another flower. They do their little waggle dance again. This time, though, instead of picking up a new piece of pollen, they take the pollen that's in their hand and put it in that cup and pick a new piece of pollen. Because when they shook, they dropped some of the pollen they already had. And so the bees will follow that first scout bee around. And at the end, you gather the bees together and show them all of the cups, and any cup that has more than one color of pom-pom in it, that one has been visited by the bees and is pollinated and can grow fruit. If you have a cup that has only one color of pom-poms in it, you can say, oh, this one didn't get pollinated, we won't have any fruit. Now, as the children get a little bit older, they don't have to follow the main scout bee. They can all just go from flower to flower, shaking their behind, pick up a pom-pom, go to the next cup, shake their behind, change their pom-pom for another one. So they can all do their own thing. But if you have really, really little kids like toddlers, I would recommend having them follow the teacher. So as I said, it's either follow the leader, free for all, they're shaking their behinds, they're getting their pom-poms, and in this way, they have pollinated their flowers. All right, so bee game version 2. So this starts with I'd say 4 and 5-year-olds, and then you can add more layers to it as the children get older. So in this version, you learn that it's not just scout bees that live in the beehive. There are many different jobs for bees. This is a great opportunity to talk about your classroom community or your larger school community, because everyone has different jobs that they need to do. And if any one person doesn't do their job, our community doesn't function as well. So in this role, I'd say for the 4 to 5 year olds, I would give them 5 jobs. So you're going to pick one kid who is the queen bee. And her job is to be in the hive. So designate a spot as the hive, maybe your classroom rug or maybe a picnic table. Their job is to lay the eggs. So you can either give them a bingo marker with a piece of paper, and every time they stamp the bingo marker, that's another egg. Or you can give them an egg carton and white cotton balls, and every time they put a cotton ball in one of the egg cartons, that's laying an egg. But that's her job, and she's just going to stay there and do that. Then you have the scout bees. The scout bees are the ones we had in the last game. So they just fly flower to flower, doing their bee dance, trading pom-poms. They can even, if they want, fly into the hive and drop off one of their pom-poms and then go and do some more exchanging. So you can kind of play around with that. Then you have the guard bees. The guard bees are the ones that stand at the entrance to the hive, and they sniff any bees coming into the hive to make sure that they belong, that they're part of the family. If they don't smell right, if they're not part of that hive, they would get stung. Now, if you really want to make this a fun experience for the kids, have them make paper headbands, attach pipe cleaners to them, and then put cotton balls at the end of the pipe cleaners for the antenna, and then put different smells on the pipe cleaners. So things like vanilla, lemon juice, vinegar, peppermint extract, whatever you like. And so then the bees actually do have to smell each other's antennas to find out if they belong to the same hive. And yes, bees do smell with their antennas. I'm not just making this up. So guard bees, very popular job. Then you have the nurse bees. The nurse bees are responsible for feeding the baby bees. So if the baby bees are cotton balls in an egg carton, then I would give the nurse bees a pretend baby bottle, a plastic spoon, a little pipette or eyedropper, and they're going to pretend like they're feeding all the cotton balls a little bit of nectar. And then lastly, you have the drone bees. The drone bees are the boy bees, and they get to do whatever they want because their only job is to mate once with the queen, and then they just hang around. So the drones, they can take a nap, they can fly around, they can, have a snack, whatever they're going to do. And so, you assign the different roles to the kids, and then you let them act out their job in the hive, in the community. And you can see all the different ways that they interact with each other. Now, I will say, for those older kids, there are actually a lot more jobs than this in a beehive. There are the builder bees, and I give them little blocks, and they're building the honeycomb. There are the fanning bees, and they're sitting there fanning like this to, either cool off the hive, warm up the hive, sometimes help the honey to form. You've got the queen attendants, and their job is to sit there and take care of the queen. So they bring her snacks, and they give her back rubs, and they give her drinks or whatever she needs. You have mortuary bees. They're the ones that clean out the dead bees from the bottom of the hive. There are the pollen packers who take all those pollen pom-poms and are shoving them inside. So there is a whole mess of different jobs you can add. So you can make this very complex for upper grades. Any questions there before I move on? Just checking. I don't see anything in the chat. Hopefully I haven't lost y'all. All right. So now the fine motor aspect of this one. And again, you can do this with real flowers or you can do this with pretend flowers. It depends on the time of year and the availability. But you're going to start by making a little bee for with the children. So it can be out of cardstock or paper or egg cartons. The important thing is that your bee shape has a Q-tip, and the Q-tip is going to go across the abdomen of the body or the thorax, whatever you've actually put there, with the 2 cotton swabs pointing out. Those are the pollen baskets. Now, you can do this outside with real flowers. I will say dandelions work really well for this. Some flowers work better than others. Or you can do it with fake flowers and then put things like cumin or saffron or cinnamon on it that they can actually rub. But then the kids take those cotton balls on the bee's knees, literally, and rub them on the flowers. And what will happen is you will get pollen or cumin or saffron or cinnamon on the Q-tip. Then have the children fly to another flower and rub the Q-tip again on that flower. And now they have just pollinated a flower for real, or pretend one. But it does work the same way that the bees do. And I've actually learned from one of my students that this is what his dad does because he raises cucumbers entirely inside and he goes around self-pollinating them. Maybe not with Q-tips, but feather dusters or whatever it may be. So kids can actually pollinate flowers for real. And this is why I say if you can get either grocery store flowers or dandelions outside, it's even cooler because you will often see yellow or orange pollen. But you can also do this, with cutouts if you need to. But it's a really fun activity to visualize the transfer of pollen. All right, so gross motor in the garden, what does that look like? Well, first of all, I do this with my students a lot, but having them act out a seed sprouting. And what we'll do for that is they pretend to be in the ground. They're all curled up like little seeds. I might come around and gently tap them on the back as if rain is falling, or gently rub them on the back as if the sun is warming their backs. And then slowly, slowly, they start to put out that first little root. And then slowly, slowly, that first little sprout pops up. And then they begin to stretch up taller, and then they get up on their knees and they get a little bit wider, and then those leaves start to unfurl, and then maybe they bloom into a flower. I might even come along and pretend to pollinate the flowers, and then they can turn into whatever fruit they would like to be if they decided to be that. You can also try doing this in a way where children learn that if you're going to be a growing plant, you need space. And so try doing it with all the seeds really crowded together. So they're all curled up in their seeds, really close together, and have them try to stretch out their roots and their leaves without bumping into someone, right? Can you stretch down and across and out? And they can't because it's too crowded. So they'll learn, oh, that doesn't work. There isn't enough. Not enough room. So then have them all spread out and try it again and see if it works better. So that's that. The pollination games I talked about, they're running around pollinating flowers and doing all that. So there's a lot of gross motor there. We talked a little bit about the garden yoga. The seed tag game, I will admit, was a Hail Mary that I used when I was teaching at camp on garden day, and my children were bouncing off the walls and we didn't know what to do. It was a bit of a silly concept, but the idea was the children started as seeds, and there was one farmer, and the seeds had to grow into a plant and bloom. And then once they bloomed, they could be like the seeds that dispersed through the wind. And so they could all run around like it was a tag game. But if the farmer tagged you, it means they had planted you and you had to go back into being a seed in the ground, grow and bloom again before you could run around. And I realize many of the seeds farmers plant are not airborne seeds. It's fine. We needed a reason to run around. You could also pretend that they were seeds that got stuck on the fur of a dog, or they were seeds that got picked up by a bird and dropped. You can be creative with it. But the idea that seeds are trying to find a way to spread out, and sometimes they land and grow where they do, and then sometimes farmers put them in the ground and they grow. So another way to get them moving. You also need to keep in mind that harvesting and preparing garden beds and weeding and planting and putting gardens to rest, all of those are very big, gross motor, heavy work. Hauling water, doing the composting, it's physical. So if you're getting the kids outside and they're doing work in the garden, it's going to be gross motor work, right? There's just a lot of muscle work you can do. And I do strongly encourage you to, get some hand trowels, or if you have the funding for it, some of the kid-sized shovels and hose. Teach them how to use it, right? You can't just hand it to a bunch of kids and think it's going to go well, but take a couple kids at a time. Give them a bit of a safety orientation. I always say that the head of the shovel or the head of the spade can't come up higher than my knee. I don't want to see anyone bringing the hoe up like this, right? Because someone's going to get hurt. So you don't lift it any higher than your knees, but you can show them how to stick it in the ground and push it down with their foot and then lift it up and turn it over. And children can learn how to do these jobs responsibly and safely, and it will be something that will be so exciting and enjoyable for many of your students who just really love to do that kind of heavy, meaningful work. All right, so again, this is one that is so much more fun when we can do it in person, but I do encourage you to do the movements along with me as we do this. Luckily, no one's going to see you being silly. You all are going to see me being silly, but it's fine. But this is an idea of how do we explain to children the ways that the different parts of a plant work together. Now for this, I'm focusing on a maple tree. Not all plants will have the same parts as a maple tree, but you could come up with versions of this for other garden plants. I will also say that maple sugaring season is right around the corner. So this is also a good activity to teach them now. So the general idea of this activity is we are going to build a living sugar maple tree, and the children are going to get to be all the parts of the tree. So we start with the centermost part of the tree, and that is called the heartwood. So ironically, the heartwood of the tree is actually the non-living center of the trunk. It doesn't grow. It does not exchange any liquids or nutrients. It's more like the bones of the tree. It's what gives the tree its strength to stay upright. Typically, when a tree falls over, it will be because the inner heartwood has rotted away. So you're going to put one child in the center, and they're going to show you their nice big muscles, and they're going to say, "I make the tree strong." So they get to stand there, and every time you look at them, they say, "I make the tree strong." So you've got the bones of your tree. Now you need the sapwood. So 2 or 3 kids are going to hold hands in a circle around your heartwood. The sapwood is where all of the water and the nutrients go up and down the trunk of the tree. So the sapwood brings the water and the minerals from the soil up into the leaves. And then when the leaves make the sugar, it brings the sugar back down the trunk and stores it in the roots. So the children that are holding the circle around the heartwood are going to take that circle of hands and crouch down and say, "Going down." And then they're going to stand up and say, "Going up." So you've got them doing that, and then your heartwood makes the tree strong. So if the heartwood are the bones of the tree and the sapwood is like the circulatory system of the tree, moving all those nutrients and fluids around, then the bark is like the skin of the tree. So just like human skin, bark keeps out germs that could make the tree sick. So you're going to have 3 kids or 4. They're going to march in a circle around your sapwood. And as they're marching, they're going to say, "We protect the tree. We protect the tree." And then you have your circle of sapwood going down, going up, and you have the heartwood, "I make the tree strong." Here is where the comparison between humans and plants stops, because unlike humans, leaves do not have a stomach that they can use to consume and digest nutrients. They have to make their own food. So instead of having stomachs like animals do, they have a kitchen or a food factory where the food is made. So those are going to be the leaves. So you can pick as many students as you need to be the leaves, and they're just going to stand somewhere outside the bark that can be scattered across the room. They put their arms up in the air, wave them around like they just don't care, and they're going to say, "We make the sugar. We make the sugar." And the bark is marching around. "We protect the tree." Sapwood is going down and going up, and the heartwood makes the tree strong. And the last part, all of those kids who thought they were going to get off easy and not have to participate, they're going to be the roots. So if the leaves are the kitchen or the food factory, the roots are the pantry. The pantry is where we store all the extra food. So the roots will get to sit on the ground somewhere, hopefully far away from the marching bark. And as they sit on the ground, they're going to go slurp, slurp, because they're pretending that they're drinking up all the water from the soil. So now you have all the kids do their part at the same time. There's going to be slurping, there's going to be marching, there's going to be hands waving around in the air. It's hysterical, it's really funny, but it's also a really cool way for kids to learn about how all the different parts of the tree work together to support the health and growth of the plant. Yes, hopefully some of you got up and actually did that. I have to say, I love doing this with teachers because they laugh so hard, and they always love seeing the people, the teachers who thought they were going to get out of it, then have to sit on the floor and say slurp a bunch of times. So, there's always some sweet, sweet revenge there. But anyway, so think about doing this with your students coming up. And again, you can do this for any tree. It doesn't have to be a sugar maple tree because all trees are doing this same process. It's just if you want to link it to the process of maple sugaring, then you may want to make it a maple tree. Any questions about that activity before I move on? Quiet group tonight. Okay. All righty. So Beyond the garden, more farm topics. This is kind of what we spoke a little bit about earlier with it's not just gardening, right? There are so many other things besides a vegetable garden that are really part of the farm to school movement. So, we are lucky enough. We live in the part of the world where maple sugaring is a thing and will be happening very soon. Children may even be noticing tapped trees in your area. Even in cities, it's not unusual to see buckets or piping that is attached to the trees. So definitely start keeping an eye out for that and talking to the children about it. You can also think about talking about honey and beekeeping. I will say there are many phenomenal beekeepers out there who love talking about the work that they do and are often willing to come in to talk to students, to bring all of their different tools that they use, their outfits, and do like a little mini lesson on it. So I strongly consider, checking out your local area and see if you can find any beekeepers who might be willing to do this. They're a wonderful resource. Thinking about woolcraft and felting, right? We live in a very cold climate. We depend on warm clothing so we can go outside. So, thinking about the process of growing and collecting, shearing wool from sheep, and then how do we get from the wool that's on the sheep to our sweaters, and trying out different ways that we can use that. And I will say, we didn't do it today because it's hard to do online, but felting is actually a very simple process that you can do with young children. And you can even buy, for very little money, balls of beautifully dyed wool for felting on the internet. I think I saw for like $23, you could get like 25 small balls of wool, colored wool, and they were all different colors. The basic idea, though, is when wool is added to warm, soapy water, it starts to reform the bonds between the hairs. And so, if you were to take the wool, get it warm and wet with that soapy water, and roll it this way with your hands, it makes a long, thin string that you could turn into a bracelet. If you form it into a ball and pass it back and forth from hand to hand, it will start to form that ball shape and hold on to it. If you lay pieces of colored felt on a piece of wool, slip it in a Ziploc bag and pour a little soapy warm water in and seal it up, and then start to agitate with your fingers, that wool will stick to the felt and make a picture. So it is a very fun sensory activity. It does not require anything fancy or expensive. You can get a bag of just plain wool. The colored wool, though, is pretty inexpensive. And it's just an interesting way to look at another way of using wool to make clothing. Most of our wool is spun into yarn, but felting is another way to make clothing. And that's where jackets like pea coats come from. That's felted wool, right? And then you can also explore the many different types of fibers that we use for our clothing, both those which come from animals and those which come from plants. So, Angora comes from rabbits, cashmere comes from goats, alpaca obviously is from alpaca. There's hemp, which is a plant, bamboo. Straw gets used for straw hats and other objects. There's cotton, there's silk from silkworms. So I love to share with my children examples of many different types of fibers that we wear. If I have samples, I let them touch them. There's great videos online. You can find videos of people literally gently pulling the loose Angora fur off the rabbit and putting it straight into a drop spindle and spinning it. So that's really neat that you can see. But, that's a fun way to explore with children, their clothing and how it gets from the plant or the animal to their bodies. Then, especially this time of year, think about doing things around grains and baking, right? You're not necessarily going to grow wheat with the children, but helping them to understand the concept that wheat and oats and barley and all of those things are also grown on farms. And this is what they look like when they're growing. And what part of it are we actually eating? And how does it get from a wheat stalk into bread? And then doing some of the basic baking and cooking with the children are all really fun ways to dive a little deeper into farm to school concepts. And then, take this one with a grain of salt. But thinking about, do you want to talk to your children about the fact that our meat and dairy and eggs come from farms and that process? So, I wouldn't necessarily get into how these food items are processed, but I do think it's important to know how much of our food comes from a farm. But if you're going to have those discussions, try to, think ahead, let the parents know what you're thinking of doing, because there are families with many different religious and cultural and personal preferences and feelings towards eating various animal products. And you just want to make sure that you have a sense of how parents might respond to this and how children might respond to this as well. So think about having those conversations, but maybe a little bit of forethought will help you get prepared for that. All right, I want to leave you with a couple of additional places where you can go for resources. And again, some of these will be listed on the web pages I'll be sending you, but always nice just to give you a reminder that you don't have to necessarily shell out big bucks to be able to do some of this work. So think about reaching out to local greenhouses or hardware stores that may have leftover seed packets or seedlings that didn't sell well that they may be willing to donate or sell for cheap that you can use for growing. Lumber yards often have lumber that was less than perfect, or pallets that they aren't using anymore, which you could convert into garden beds or compost bins. Then there's also all kinds of educational opportunities. You can reach out to agriculture students at local tech schools or universities or undergrad that might be willing to do some volunteering and help get your garden started or do a lesson or two. I already mentioned reaching out to beekeepers. Thinking about 4-H clubs do a lot around gardening and harvesting as well as livestock, and maybe they would be willing to do a lesson or a program for your school. Eagle Scouts are usually doing some kind of final project, and that's how we got our garden beds created at our school. They did that for their project. Grocery stores might be interested in partnering with you to do a field trip or to talk to you or let you interview them about where their food comes from and how do they display it and how do they help keep it fresh. You can also think about partnering with local farms, farmer markets, and grocery stores that might be able to either donate unsold products or give discounts or help in other ways to supply additional food sources for the schools or the families. And then tons of incredible resources from other organizations doing farm to school work, including Shelburne Farms, Island Grown Schools, Growing Minds, certainly Mass Farm to School, as Dinah already mentioned, some of the incredible resources they have, and so many more. All right, and then just starting to wrap us up here, some additional resources from Mass Audubon. So first of all, on the right-hand side there, you'll see our Nature Smart workbooks. These are not farm themed, but they are very diverse topics from nature-based learning, and they start ages 4 to 6 and then go up from there. Fun activity books you can check out that have a whole bunch of different things you can do with children: scavenger hunts, art projects, science activities, nature hero activities where kids can do things that make a positive difference for nature. So you can check those out at the QR code. We also at Mass Audubon offer a whole host of workshops and trainings that we can do online or virtually. This is our Kids in the Garden series, but we also have 2 series all around how to teach about nature inside and outside of your program, as well as a deep dive into nature-based curriculum for early ed. And we do customized professional trainings. We have some schools that have very particular topics that they want trainings around that we can create for you. We do site visits, and I've actually done them for some of the schools that are here today. And that's where we come and visit your school. You kind of show us around your indoor and outdoor spaces and talk to us a little bit about how you're already using them. And then we provide some ideas on ways you can use your existing space and resources to do more nature and garden-based learning. We also offer curriculum consulting and coaching. We can come in and do demo lessons at your schools, and then we debrief with the teaching team and start co-planning and co-teaching our lessons together, and then eventually move into a mentoring role where the teachers take over the design and the implementation of those lessons. And then when you put all of those services together, you get our Deep Impact Seeds program, which is a 9 to 12 month program where we work closely with your schools to support teachers' comfort and experience for teaching about garden-based or nature-based learning, so that at the end of the year, you really feel confident making this a regular part of your learning in your classroom. And then just a couple of free resources, and then I will open it up to questions and hand it back to Dinah. But we do offer a quarterly early ed newsletter that we send out. And every season we send it with new curriculum ideas based on something happening during the season. We also post on there places like this, where we're going to be offering workshops that you can sign up for. Oftentimes, they are offered for free. So if you want to be able to take more workshops with us, then you may want to sign up. And I will send the link out after this workshop to do so. And then our website has several free resources. So we have 4 nature-based STEM units online for early educators, available English and Spanish. And those are trees, weather, dirt, and birds. So very general topics that can be adapted to many different school zones. There are Young Explorer activity pages online. We have nature bingo cards that you can use as scavenger hunts for the different seasons. And there are also videos online that show what it looks like when kids are outside and playing in nature. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much. This is one email you can reach me at, but you can also use the one that I sent you earlier in the week. And that's a quick QR code with like a 3-question survey. If you want to answer it, to just let us know how we can better serve your interests and needs. And with that, I'm going to open it up to Dinah, and I'll stay on for a little bit to answer any questions anyone may have.
Rena, thank you so much. I always feel so positive and just calm after hearing you, because all of these ideas are so lovely. So I hope other people are leaving with the same feeling. We'll hang out for a little bit. I put if you were interested in getting the Harvest of the Month for Early Childhood Educator newsletter, it's a monthly crop a local crop that is featured in the newsletter. There are classroom activities, and there are different things to share with students, books, book lists, related to that crop, jokes, crop history, and then announcements for Mass Farm to School on opportunities. So please consider signing up, and hopefully we will see you. We're going to hang out here for a few minutes in case anyone has questions, and hopefully we'll see you at session 3, which will be next Thursday. Same time, same channel.
And session 3, we're going to be doing a little bit of cooking. So have some heavy cream and a jar with a lid on hand.
Oh, sounds like we might be making butter.
We might be. Last time I failed to do it successfully because I didn't have cream and I tried lactate milk. It does not work.
Yes, make sure you
Yeah.
lactate
You want
will
cream
not work. You got to have some cream for it. Oh, that's great. Now I know I'm gonna have some fresh butter next week.
Yeah,
So,
we are.
any questions, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, have a great night. Thanks for staying with us, and thanks for your patience with our tech issues. And we hopefully will see you on Thursday.